So, everyone, this is Kelsey Thompson, and so excited to have you, Kelsey. This is a brand new call that Kelsey has never done before. We kind of collaborated on the idea. I wanted to kind of talk about the things she's touched on before, but also add in kind of the self-advocacy aspect of it. And for Valentine's Day, we wanted to kind of talk about loving yourself, that you can love a partner, you can love a friend, but you can also love yourself, and that is very important. So Kelsey, I will let you. Oh, and well, real quick before I let Kelsey take it away, after Kelsey speaks, she has some questions to get the conversation going, but we would love for this to be a conversation, which is why it's maybe good that this is not a huge call right now, because I would love for this to grow into an actual conversation. It's not just going to be Kelsey talking at you. Kelsey's going to talk, and then we're going to hopefully what she says will spark some conversation. So without further ado, Kelsey.
All right. Thank you so much, Casey. I'm gonna just before I even get into anything, I want to apologize because the chair that I'm sitting in right now is like the loudest chair in the world. So if you hear this like noise,
I can't hear a thing,
oh,
so
really? Okay, it makes this
not a thing.
awful
No,
squeaky
you're
noise.
good.
My husband got this chair at an antique store, and I forget when I use it on Zoom calls that it makes this like hideous screeching sound when I move. So, disclaimer, we're going to start with that. All right. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. It looks like I know some of you, but some are some new names. So I'm excited to be here. And I wanted to talk for just a second to kind of introduce you guys to this idea of resilience. So I said that's kind of our whole goal for the topic tonight is just to talk about ways we can grow our own resilience. So what we mean when we talk about resilience, I don't know if you ever notice when you hear you kind of sometimes you hear these inspirational stories of people who just sort of refuse to be defeated even after being knocked down repeatedly. There's like, these inspirational stories of like entrepreneurs and artists and social activists and things like that. So what these people kind of have in common is this idea of resilience. So resilience is defined as the process by which people adapt to change, crises, or problems. So it's that capacity for like positive adaptation and the ability to thrive when confronted with adversity. There's this Japanese proverb that I absolutely love, and it says something to the effect of like fall down 7 times, get up 8, right? And that is kind of what we mean when we talk about resilience. Interesting thing about resilience that I think is really cool is that it's not an innate trait. All of these like researchers that are studying it, they find that it's actually something you can learn. It's not just that some people are born resilient and some people aren't. So there's steps that you can take in your daily life to make yourself more resilient. It can be learned by anyone, but it just takes some effort to get there. So those two components of resilience, one is that exposure to adversity. We don't call you resilient if nothing bad ever happens to you, right? So to be resilient, we have to first have some kind of negative experiences, whatever those might be. And then the second component is that sense of like hope, optimism, confidence, self-efficacy that kind of helps to bring us through it and actually makes us stronger and more empowered because of that. The idea of self-efficacy, by the way, is one that I really think is cool. And I define it. So I'm a parent, right? I've got a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old. But when they were younger, we often read the book The Little Engine That Could, and that is like the definition of self-efficacy. It's that idea of like I think I can. It's not just self-confidence, but it's just sort of that belief that you're competent, that you're capable, that you can do it. So, why we care about resilience, those of us in the mental health world, we love talking about it because resilience is associated with all kinds of really great um, things like psychological health, mental health, symptom management, quality of life, physical health. Like people who have resilience are just doing better all around in their daily lives. So, it's why it matters for those of us with albinism because obviously we do face some adversity as people with albinism. So I was kind of breaking this down into a couple of like categories, sort of like those not so good aspects of living with albinism, right? Like from my own perspective and from having talked to a lot of people with albinism in my life. And so some of those that come to mind is like inaccessible environments and products. So like, things that weren't designed for people with low vision in mind, right? Just kind of dealing with those like stressful thing like those kiosks at the airport. I hate those things, right? And like they're always in the sunniest part of the terminal, and I'm always like trying to get in and read them. Inaccessibility can be a real big source of adversity. We deal with rude comments, questions, and reactions from strangers sometimes. That's this whole stares, smirks, and shout outs thing that I've talked about at other NOAA sessions. And I break those down. There's like 3 different types of them. So one is the silent, right? So those are like those things that you maybe notice and maybe you don't, where it's like a stare or, somebody just kind of lingering a little bit too long, a smirk, a giggle that's kind of concealed. Those things that maybe you see when you're out in public, but you can't really react to them without looking like a lunatic sometimes, right? The second are what I call the rudely curious questions. So these are the people who maybe don't have bad intentions. They just have never seen a person with albinism before, and they just have a lot of questions. Oh, do your parents have hair that color? Why are you holding your book so close? Those kinds of things, where it is just genuine curiosity. It is still rude and sometimes obtrusive, but their intention is just, is not malicious. And then, so that's the rudely curious. And then the third category are the curiously rude. So those are the ones where it is just kind of straight up rude, comments, the classic, like, "Hey, albino," yelled from a moving car and that kind of thing. My favorite example of that one, by the way, and I can laugh at it now, but at the time it really got me down. This was long ago before I had kids. I was living in the city. I think I was like in my 20s and I was on my way to work. And I don't know, so like some of you guys who live in like Minnesota and in the colder climates and stuff, that when we're in like early spring and you have that first like really warm day where you can go out without a coat and you get to wear like, those cute like spring clothes that you bought and you haven't had a chance to wear all winter. It was one of those days. So I had left for work and I was feeling good and the birds were singing and the sun was out. And I had kind of, I just kind of had a spring in my step that morning. I was on my way to work and then like a car drove by and the guy just yelled out the car like, "Hey, albino." And I was like, why? Why would you like today of all days? And then I started laughing because I was like, what was going through that guy's head? Like what that made him think he had to yell that? He's like, "Oh man, look at this girl walking down the street. I got to take her down a notch. Like she's feeling just too good today." So those are what I classify as the curiously rude types of comments. We all know them, right? You know them when you see them, and they do come up from time to time. We also deal with the stigma of having albinism. There's that negative portrayal and image of albinism that we see a lot in media and just kind of the stigma of difference that we come up against a lot. And then there's also this concept of self-stigmatization. So when you have a highly stigmatized condition, like something like albinism, sometimes we tend to internalize those messages that we get from the rest of the world. So we kind of like internalize and anticipate these messages and feel negatively about ourselves because of the image that we see. We have transportation adversity when it comes to transportation sometimes, right? I don't know about you guys. I don't drive. I live in an area with really awesome public transit by choice. But sometimes that can be a real hassle, especially as a parent, where I can't just like swing out and pick up my kids and take them somewhere when they need to go somewhere. I've got to plan ahead or pay extra and take an Uber or walk when it's inclement weather, whatever, right? So not being able to drive can sometimes be a big source of adversity, of stress for us. We deal with sun protection. Hello. I was out at the park today with my kid in mid-February, and I think I actually got a sunburn on the top of my head,
Mhm.
which is fun. But yeah, just kind of dealing with the stressors of sun protection can be one of those negative aspects of albinism. And then, of course, just the vision impairment, right? Like dealing with eye fatigue, not recognizing a friend when you pass them on the street, or not recognizing a coworker at work. Though just the day-to-day like visual hassles of having albinism. Often you'll notice I put the vision impairment like last on my list, and that's because when I think about it, it's for many of us, it's the social, the technical, the attitudinal barriers that are the most frustrating about living with albinism. Um, I would much rather have my environment be more accessible and accepting of me the way I am than trying to like fix, myself to fit the environment. So that can be, that's where a lot of my stressors lie. So all these factors that challenge our resilience, they can be like little day-to-day stressors. They can be big, major changes. They can be cumulative events like bullying and microaggressions. Microaggressions are a lot of what we would classify in those like, stares, smirks, and shout outs kind of categories, um, the social aspects of having albinism. And there's this analogy that I heard one time at a training at work that I thought was perfectly apt for that. And they made the analogy that microaggressions are like mosquito bites. So if you lived your day-to-day life and maybe you got a mosquito bite once in a while, and it would be a little annoyance, it would be itchy and unpleasant, but it would just happen once in a while. It really wouldn't be a big deal, right? But if you got 20 mosquito bites every day, for your entire life, that would be hugely annoying and disruptive to your well-being, right? Disruptive to your life. So that's how we think about microaggressions. Those of us who live with stigmatized conditions sometimes have to deal with more of that stuff than those who don't. And there's also like acute events too, those like traumas and bigger, bigger things that can also challenge our resilience. So it takes all different types of forms. It's not to say that our adversity has to come with, big, significant, challenging events. Sometimes it's just those day-to-day stressors that can kind of pile up on us. So that's what we mean when we talk about resilience. So let's talk about like how we build that, how we can make ourselves more resilient when we're, dealing with these kinds of stressors. So for that, we look at this issue of self-care, and I'm going to talk just real briefly about like these 8 categories of self-care, and then I want to hear a little bit from you guys. So I'm stealing this from there's a concept, there's this really cool diagram that the Veterans Health Administration put out that's called the Wheel of Health. So again, I'm not speaking in my official capacity as a VA employee here, but I like the concept. It's really relatable to what we're talking about here. And if anybody's interested in getting the full like infographic, I can send it out. It's pretty cool. But basically what it does is it breaks down the idea of self-care into these 8 categories, 8 things we need to think about. And I don't think there's going to be any surprises here, but I think it is just good to sort of think of each of them on its own. So the first category they talk about is moving the body. It doesn't mean we're talking about exercise. The goal isn't to get physically fit or to lose weight or anything like that. The goal here is just to move, just to use your muscles, move your body. And there's ways to do this that don't cost anything. There's ways to do this that are accessible to us with low vision. It's just seeking out opportunities to be more physically active. Whether that's walking, climbing the stairs instead of taking the elevator, doing some light stretches at night, getting into a more physical fitness program, whatever that looks like for you. But the goal is just to be more physically active. When we're more physically active, our mood improves, our energy improves, our sleep improves. All these things are kind of contingent on that. The second category is our surroundings. So this is actually like our physical and emotional environment. Have you ever noticed that, how your environment can have an impact on your mood and your outlook on things depending on what you surround yourself with? So that is just to get us thinking about where we place ourselves when it's our home, when it's our work, when it's our community, to think about how our physical environment can impact our mood and our health. Third category is personal development. I love this one. So this is like our personal life and our work life, how you exercise your mind. Lots of folks on here said that one of the things they like to do for fun is reading a book. Yes, I love reading. So just finding some time to like kind of feed your head and maybe learn a new skill, avoid that doom scrolling, right? Find something positive to do with your brain. And to kind of work that frontal lobe a little bit. The next category is our food and drink, what we actually consume, what we put into our bodies. So food affects our mood, our emotions, our energy, our overall mental health. So just to be more conscious about what we're actually consuming, what we're eating, what we're drinking. Next one is recharging. So how we sleep and refresh ourselves. This is something I learned recently. I use it with myself. I use it with my kids. I use it with my veteran patients that I serve at work. And it's this idea that when we go to bed, our goal isn't to sleep. Our goal should be to rest, which I think makes it a lot easier. Sometimes if you're having a hard time falling asleep, you're like, I go to bed, my goal is to fall asleep, and I just can't do it. Goal shouldn't be sleep. Your goal should just be to rest. And that's easy to do. So things you can do to just help yourself, rest and recharge. Can like avoid those screens at night. Keep thinking about how sleep affects your stress response, the quality of your relationships, even your pain tolerance. Your pain tolerance is worse when you're not getting a good night's sleep. So think about how you structure your days and making sure you're factoring in time for rest. The next category is our relationships, our families, friends, coworkers. A couple of folks said one of the things they do for fun is spending time with family and friends. So we think about those people that are positive influences to us. Nothing is more important to happiness and resilience than the social connections that we have. Isn't that amazing? So who you surround yourself with, you finding role models, finding people that kind of help build your empathy, finding that like shared humanity with a community, making connections, reducing social distance, consider ways to stay connected with people that don't even cost anything, just like doing stuff like this, right? Being on our NOAA connections. And the flip side of this one also is setting boundaries. Sometimes there are people who can be toxic. There are people who are not good for our mental health, who are not good for our emotional well-being. And it's hard to do, but sometimes you do need to set those boundaries to kind of keep those more negative and toxic people at a distance, and to bring in those that uplift you and have a more positive influence on you. Our next one is the next category is spirit and soul. So like growing and connecting, finding a purpose. There's this I don't know what it is, a parable or something, when we talk about finding our purpose. So there's three bricklayers, and they're working and they're laying bricks. And this guy goes up to the first bricklayer and he says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Oh, I'm building. I'm laying bricks." And then he goes to the second one and he says, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm building a wall." And then he goes to the third bricklayer and he says, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I'm building a cathedral." So sometimes it's just about putting it into perspective, right? Sometimes the mundane stuff, the day-to-day stuff can feel kind of small, but when we think about that big picture of what our purpose is, why it all matters, it helps to sort of keep us going. So let me see. So within this category too, we think about like how we find our purpose, activities that allow you to explore and express your beliefs, your morals, your values, deepen your connection with yourself, higher power. This could be organized religious activity. It could be rituals, meditation, prayer, whatever helps you to just kind of reflect and get in touch with your spirit, your soul, that kind of thing. And I think this one's, yeah, this is the last category, is called the power of the mind. So kind of separate from these other ones, has to do with more like relaxing and healing. So practicing self-compassion. Avoid making comparisons to other people. We have this adage we say in the mental health world a lot, where we say, don't compare your inside to somebody else's outside. And I think a lot of us are guilty of that, especially now in the days of social media. It's really easy to see other people and to be like, man, that person, like they've really got their stuff together. Like I just don't feel like I'm anywhere near as good as this person is. Like their life looks so perfect. But what you're seeing is really not a representation of how that person is doing, right? It's so easy for us to compare ourselves to others and to just make and to feel down on ourselves for that. But you have to recognize that what you're seeing is really just that image that person's putting out there. It's not always a representation of how they're doing. We need to practice this concept called unconditional self-acceptance. Isn't that an awesome concept, by the way? The first time I saw it in writing, like I almost dropped the book. I was like, what a novel idea that is. Unconditional self-acceptance, regardless of what anybody else says of you, regardless of any other message you get from the outside world, you have to be able to look at yourself and be like, cool with who I am. I'm cool with this, you know? And it's something that, I mean, I'm still working on it day to day, but it's something cool to like to when we talk about our self-care, to think about how we accept ourselves as we are, how we express gratitude, positive self-talk, activities that allow you to express your feelings, journaling, humor, support groups, creative arts, right? All those things that kind of help us to heal and sort of get in touch with that part of ourselves. When we talked earlier, I mean, I had you do your intros and I asked you those three things you do for fun. As I said, there was intention to that, because sometimes these like leisure activities, whether it's a real structured thing or just, you know, something casual that you do, they really, really, really matter a lot to us, to our self-care, to our well-being, our resilience, and all that stuff. So I want to like just scroll back up here in my notes for a second. There was this study, here it is. There was a researcher named Glenda Jessup. So she wrote her master's thesis on, she did a qualitative study of young adults who are visually impaired and found some really interesting connections between leisure activities and resilience. So she found that leisure activities were found to do all of the following. They reduce social isolation. They promote social connections with peers who share common interests. So even like informal, like solitary or family activities have the potential to help develop into like, you know, other activities that foster connections. It all, you know, can kind of tie in there. Leisure activities help promote feelings of acceptance. They provide stress relief. I think Rachel said that, right? Like when you're feeling down, you play the piano or something. I used to do that all the time in high school. That was my go-to when I was having a bad day. Like, let's just sit down at the piano. They can help with like overcoming anxiety and fear. They provide support, finding perspective on fear, adversity, and stress. I found that definitely, even like in challenging myself with like sports and that kind of thing, like things that I thought I couldn't do before, it was really an awesome way to kind of prove to myself, like, yeah, I could do it. I may not have been the best at it, but it was totally doable for me. They promote optimism about the future, establish a positive self-identity, give us access to fitness and health learning, help us experience new things, experience challenges. They give us enjoyment. They give us a way to contribute to others, to lift other people up, to learn about ourselves, to develop self-management skills like setting goals and time management. So important, right? Sometimes our leisure activities are the ways we learn those things. They help us develop skills and a sense of accomplishment, that sense of mastery, like I was just talking about, the confidence to take on new challenges, or self-efficacy, like the little engine that could that I mentioned at the beginning. Leisure activities promote a sense of competence, optimism, the ability to thrive amidst adversity. I'm still going here. There's more on the list. They challenge social stereotypes and prejudices about disability. Sometimes we have, people have lowered expectations for us, right? When I started to get involved with this triathlon community, one of the things I loved about them was they just treated me like an athlete. All their athletes have some type of disability, and for them, I was just another athlete. They didn't treat me as some special athlete or someone who needed special accommodations. It was just like, okay, let's find a way to get you into this and and help you reach your goals. And I love that about it. So that's why when we talked about, when I asked you to what those things are that you do for fun, those really, really matter. Sometimes it isn't just for fun. Like those are the things that really help us to develop resilience and to become the best person we can be. So think about, are there activities that you would like to do more, ways you can kind of fit those in? It can be really, really hard when we're dealing with a lot of stressors and, juggling a bunch of different identities, but it is really important that we factor in some time for those activities that matter. It's not just, a luxury or something that you do for fun. It matters for your self-care. And think about ways that you can kind of fit those in and make that happen. And like incremental steps you can take to that goal. If you have a goal of maybe running like 10 miles a week, that's great, but you got to start somewhere, right? You may not be able to start right at that point. So maybe your goal is to just have one day a week when you go out to run. And that's and you can celebrate those victories when you have them. But it's all about just like setting what's the acronym? SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, what's the A stand? Attainable, realistic, and time sensitive goals, right? It's about working to set those goals for yourself. Um, One of the things also, and I can't remember whose comment made me think of it, but there's something, one of my vets, so I work as a rehabilitation counselor with disabled veterans. Most of my veterans have severe mental illness. Some are dealing with substance use disorder, homelessness, physical disabilities, sometimes all of the above. And I've so a lot of my vets are kind of working through personal recovery from substance use disorder. And from them, I've learned a lot about the 12-step program, which are actually really applicable to everyday life. I've learned a lot from them that I've kind of used on myself as well, the more I learn about the 12 steps. And one of my vets introduced me to this concept of being thankful for your problems, which sounds kind of weird, but I'll try to explain it as best I can. And I guess it's just a way of kind of factoring in gratitude, in your life whenever you can. I drive my kids nuts with that because I'm always working on helping them to be, to have a better sense of gratitude. So every night at dinner, I'm always asking them, like, give me, one thing that you're thankful for today, one thing you're grateful for. And like my teenager rolls her eyes at me, and my 9-year-old is like, I don't know, there's nothing I'm grateful for today. And sometimes it might just be something little, right? Like if it's a hot summer day, you might just be like, I'm grateful that I'm sitting in a house with air conditioning right now. It might just be I'm grateful that we're having tacos for dinner or something. And sometimes it might be something really big, like I'm grateful somebody did a act of kindness for me today. It really helped me out. I'm really grateful for that. Whatever. But just find, like, getting into a practice where you think about things that you're appreciative for, that you're thankful for, can really helps us to focus on those things more. It helps us to focus less on the negative. And again, I'm not like trying to preach this like always look on the bright side of life kind of nonsense where we pretend that everything is great even when it's not. But even on the crappiest of days, we can always find one thing, something that we're grateful for, right? Maybe your day was horrible, but at least I was having a good hair day today, or whatever it is, right? But anyway, this concept my vet talked about is being grateful for your problem. So what he was explaining to me was that when he's dealing with a particular problem, he finds some way to frame it as something he's thankful for. So I'm trying to think of an example. I know there was an example from a couple years ago when I was at work. My daughter was younger at the time, and my husband had a job where he was working an hourly job. He didn't have paid sick leave. So if he didn't work, he didn't get paid. And my daughter, I went into work early, and my husband was at home with my daughter. He was going to take her into daycare, and he called me at work that morning and he says, "Hey, Phoebe is sick. She's not going to be able to go to daycare today. Do you think you could come home and stay with her?" And I said, "No problem." So I told my boss real quick. I said, "Hey, I got to take sick leave for the rest of the day. My kid is sick." I hopped on the bus. I went home. I walked to the house and, got my kid. And it was a stressful day because I had to rush to get home. So I'm worried about my daughter, obviously. And my husband had to get to work. I was worried about all the stuff at work that wasn't going to get done. But then I looked at that day and I was like, you know what? I am grateful that I have a job that I could just run out like that and a boss who was understanding. I'm grateful that I had paid sick leave for the day that I could use. I'm grateful that I have access to public transit where I live so that I could just hop on a bus and get home to be there with my daughter. And I'm thankful that I have a daughter, right? Like even though she wasn't feeling well, like I was just grateful that I had those were the problems I had to deal with that day. Could have been a lot worse. And it's not like again, I don't want to, sometimes people be like, oh, it really puts it in perspective when somebody's always got it worse than you. I'm not a fan of doing that, but at least to look at our problems and to be like, even within that, I can find something that I can be grateful for.
Kelsey, you mentioned that you have a sibling with albinism and a sibling without albinism. So I'm going to use this as the example. This call right here. How many non-albino people are there that can sit on a Zoom call and talk about all the ways that as a community I mean, this is like a therapy session, guys. That no, most people have to go to therapy to get this kind of information and this
Dang,
support network.
Karen.
So, not that I'm thankful to have albinism. I mean, that sounds ridiculous to say grateful, but I am grateful to have this resource, and I might not have had it if I was not a person with albinism. So, I guess that short little connection to be made here for this call even.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like sometimes I look
Yeah.
at the people in my life that I've met through Noah and I'm like, I'm just so grateful that I got to know you. There was one of the Noah conferences we had back in Las Vegas, which I think was in 2008. The conference theme was Imagine Your Luck. And I still think about that. Like, imagine my luck that I got to like meet all of you awesome people. I would have never otherwise gotten a
It's
chance to
really
meet.
rare that you'd have this many friends scattered around the country and the globe. Like that's just not common. Usually it's people around you and in near proximity, and we're all so far apart and we would have never met otherwise.
Yeah, and not just that, but people that you feel this like a connection with, right? Like
Yes.
when I meet
Yeah.
another person with albinism, you kind of have that sort of unspoken understanding,
Yes.
that you don't get from just other randos.
We have a first timer, Casey.
Yeah, I see that. Guys, this is my first time here and I'm so
Welcome.
glad. Oh, we're so glad you're here too. We hope you still come back to some of the calls. We have fun social connections. We have other fun calls coming up. We hope this is your first, but not your last. Welcome.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yes. Awesome.
Well, I hope this was helpful to you guys. I wanted to, just kind of if there's anything that I'm going to put my email address in the chat actually. But if
Yes,
there's anything
please.
we
Yeah.
talked about, if you guys want more information about it, or anything like that, any articles that I based some of this research